It's just a whole bunch of paper and stuff.
Well, yeah, it's right up there. Out there.
That's the committee that built this whole monument and plaza. Okay. Yeah. And so this is the committee that oversaw the building of the monument, the plaza, and then oversees or organizes the Veterans Day ceremonies. And we specifically call the ceremonies Voices from the Stone. And we do a lot of research to determine if we can find family members, living family members of those that appear on the back of the monument. Anyone who died or was killed in combat or died as a POW from Union County, their names are on the back of the stone, respective to the war that they served in. And so today we are honoring 2 people who graduated from Marysville High School that died in the same aircraft in the Burma theater in World War II.
How did you, I would imagine that finding those stories is not the easiest thing, you know?
Well, we have a committee, a subcommittee that works on that every year.
They came in about a little more than 5 minutes after you. Okay. So they're there. What we need now is somebody that runs running the sound system. And Bo said he was there.
Hi there, how are you? Good. Hi, General. All right, how you going, buddy? Never going to get any more weather. It's no good tomorrow. Yeah, you better be setting your front chair. I have a little thing I can adjust it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's good.
Not working too good. I kept trying to find it. I didn't know if there was.
We can probably set that. We'll find a spot for that. I mean, that looks really nice. And actually, what I may do is, I don't know that they have room for it over at the Courthouse. Otherwise, because I have. Welcome. My name is Bo Johnstone, and I am an Army veteran, and it's my pleasure this afternoon to be your Master of Ceremonies for today's Veterans Day program. And on behalf of all the veterans and their families, we'd like to welcome you to today's ceremony. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you to please turn off your cell phones. And to begin the ceremony today, I would like to thank all those who make this program possible. First, I'd like to recognize the Voice from the Stone subcommittee. They conducted the research and made the selection of the Porter and Niebler families for the honors this year. And I would also like to thank the following for their assistance in researching the honorees: Sue Keenbaum from the Marysville Public Library, Bill McCarthy, Jim Snyder, Dorma Lee Mayer, Mary Mitchell, Mary Jane Crothers, and many others that shared their research and personal remembrances of today's honorees. Secondly, I would like to acknowledge the hard work done by the many members of the Veterans Remembrance Committee. They helped with the installation and maintenance of the pavers. And as such, special thanks go to Marie Buick, Charlene Roush, and Alan Seymour and their volunteers. If you are interested in purchasing a replica of the Veterans Monument, and I have a sample here, Charlene Roush has Cat's Meow replicas available on behalf of the Remembrance Committee. Finally, we would like to thank everyone that helped us today with making this ceremony possible. If you'll look at your program, you'll see they're all listed there, with the exception of the Civil Air Patrol, and we want to make sure that they get their recognition also. And we would like to thank anyone else that we may have left off the program. And we are here this afternoon with several purposes. The first is to continue the tradition that started in 1919 when President Woodrow Wilson declared the first Armistice Day remembrance as a day set aside to honor the men fallen in the Great War. It ended the previous year on the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, or 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918. Part of the tradition is remembering the service of all who have served in our nation's military, whether in war or peace. And we especially remember those that made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Finally, today, in Voices from the Stone, we will hear about two men from Union County that both died during World War II in the true manner of John 15:13. Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Captain John Blackie Porter and Sergeant Harold Niebler were part of the Army Air Corps' original search and rescue operations in the China-Burma-India theater and were shot down during a rescue operation in World War II. Blackie's cousin, Janet Porter, and Harold's niece, Sharon Kuntz, will share their stories with us today. The Veterans Service Office has a World War II display and photographs in the County Commissioner's office for viewing. If you would all please rise now and remain standing for the presentation of the colors, Pledge of Allegiance, National Anthem, and Invocation. All veterans are authorized to present a hand salute during the pledge and National Anthem. Everyone else, please place your hand over your heart. The colors will be presented by the local veterans group 40 and 8, Voiture 857. Ryan Klaus, Life Scout from Troop 634 and a member of the Army National Guard, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The National Anthem will be performed by Nakrina de Blanco Alvarez. The invocation will be given by the Reverend Barry Scott of Trinity Lutheran Church, the home church of Harold Niebler. Color Guard, post the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, you say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Pastors are a little too windy. We don't want you standing too long, so. I'm proud to be here with you today as we remember and give our thanks to those who have served in the armed forces of our nation. I serve the congregation of Trinity Lutheran Church, which has a deep history of service and of responding to the call of freedom and liberty, which is echoed in Union County as a whole. I brought with me today a bronze plaque which used to sit in our narthex and currently sits in a historical display case in our Cana Hall. I know that hundreds of people see it every Sunday as they walk by with their donuts and their coffee, but it has the name of those who in our congregation who gave their lives in the Second World War, and it's also commemoration to all those who served in the First and the Second World War. Harold Niebler's name is first on this, and I want to set it here so later you can take a look. In a letter dated October 1822, President John Quincy Adams wrote, "Individual liberty is individual power, and the nation which enjoys the most freedom must be, in proportion to its numbers, the most powerful nation." The novelty in President Adams' letter is not the idea that liberty is an individual right inalienable to all of humanity. The right to liberty was recognized by the framers of the Constitution and the writers of the Declaration of Independence. No, the novel idea of President Adams is that our true power as a nation is found in our collective liberty, that each of us shares a covenant with our fellow Americans to pursue a flourishing life together. It's a recognition that my life is bound up with yours, and that when your liberty is shackled by chains of repression, so is mine, and that my happiness cannot ride on the back of your misery. The true power of America, wrote Adams, is our ability to stand together in all of our sacred individuality, while together looking forward to a common horizon. In a world that's filled with challenges and competing interests between nations, we have the opportunity to harness the great potential of the American spirit, its promise, to remain a great country and to continue to be the guiding light of the nations. But to be a nation that shares a common faith, its citizens must live in service to liberty. We must learn to sacrifice our self-interest for a greater good. We must realize that freedom and liberty are only as powerful, as Adam remarked, when they express themselves collectively. Today, we celebrate those who, through the spirit of service, committed their lives to something greater than themselves. Today, we praise their ability to rise above their own individual lives and self-interest for the sake of the greater cause. And today, we also remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of our collective liberty. It is this spirit of service and sacrifice that makes true freedom possible, and America a powerful nation both home and abroad. Today is for remembering, to stand in honor of those who have served and those who still do, to walk in the path of duty, to remember the cost, and to hold in our hearts the cause of freedom. We remember today, this Veterans Day, our veterans. And let us pray. Heavenly Father, we ask your blessings on all who gather here today to to celebrate and to give thanks for the lives of the many courageous men and women who gave their youth, dedication, energy, and often their lives to protect and defend our nation. From training fields to battlefields, by air, land, and sea, many true patriots, armed with an immense passion for freedom, set out for the fronts of Northern Africa, the European theater, the distant islands of the Pacific, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan, and our own borders and coastlines, to keep the peace and to guard the inalienable rights of liberty for all people. On this Veterans Day, we remember their sacrifices, and we ask your blessings upon their families that they so selflessly left behind during times of conflict and in times of keeping the peace. Preserve and protect those who currently serve, and sustain and support the families of these uniformed patriots. Help us to hold in our hearts the love and devotion of these defenders of freedom. We also pray for the leaders of our nation. Strengthen them as they seek to find solutions to the great task of creating a peaceful world while calling young men and women to serve their country. Instill in our hearts and our minds the knowledge that love of country is more than a nostalgic memory of our culture. Give us wisdom to value the sacrifices made by our forefathers and the strength to emulate their mission of a safe and secure peace. On all of us gathered here at this sacred memorial, we ask your favor, O Lord God. May we enjoy the peace that you intend, a world filled with understanding and hope and promise. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Scott, Ryan, Nakrina, and 40 at 8. 70 years ago, in 1943, the Chinese and Japanese had been fighting for 6 years. The Sino-Japanese War began with the Marco Polo Bridge incident of July 1937, followed by the invasion of China by Japan. By 1943, all of China's seaports were controlled by the Japanese, as were most of their major cities. Yet, China continued the struggle. In early 1942, China lost her last overland supply line, the Burma Road, when Japanese forces overran Burma and advanced to the border of India. However, it was important for the United States to keep China supplied and involved in the war. The Chinese were keeping many Japanese troops from being sent to the Pacific, where the U.S. would have to defeat them. So the Air Transport Command, or ATC, was given the job of flying supplies from bases in India over the Himalaya Mountains to the airfields in China. This was known as the Hump Route. The combat theater was known as the China-Burma-India, or CBI. The Hump was the nickname for the Satsang Range of the Himalayas, which rose to over 15,000 feet. The route itself was a 550-mile journey from bases in the Brahmaputra Valley in India to Kunming, China. It was also called the Aluminum Trail because of all the crashed planes along the route. The planes used by the ATC were C-47 Skytrains, C-46 Commandos, and C-87 Liberator Expresses, which were B-24 bombers reconfigured into cargo planes and were the only ones designed to fly at high altitude. Most of the planes in the theater were C-47s and C-46s, and all of them were unarmed. The weather was a major obstacle. Clouds were a constant hazard, taking visibility to zero in an instant. During winter, winds up to 100 miles per hour were always a threat, and updrafts could force planes upwards at the rate of a mile a minute. Downdrafts could slam a plane into the ground without warning. In summer, it could heat up to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which caused vapor locks in the engines, dooming the planes and crews. Flooding rains could close fields and runways in a short time, forcing planes to look for another field to land on. Finally, the flights were across enemy-held territory where Japanese fighter planes could attack at any moment. By 1945, the ATC had lost over 594 planes and 910 crewmen. This is where Blackie, Harold, and several other Union County men served, and the first search and rescue team came into being. In 1940, Blackie was working for the McCall's Publishing Company in Dayton when he enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He He enlisted on November 22nd at Fort Thomas, Kentucky, across the river from Cincinnati. It was for this reason an article in Life magazine in 1944 about the hump in CBI listed Blackie's hometown as Cincinnati. Sometime in his life, Blackie had learned to fly, as several histories list him as a former stunt pilot. But that he knew how to fly was obvious, because it normally took a pilot 8 months to complete training. Blackie was graduated and commissioned a second lieutenant in about 6 months on July 11th, 1941. He was stationed at Randolph Field, Texas, and Maxwell Field, Alabama, among other stations. On December 10, 1941, he married his sweetheart, Ellen Jane Smith, at her sorority at Ohio State. Because of his skill as a pilot, he was rated to fly both single and multi-engine planes, including the B-17, B-24, and B-25 bombers, and the P-38 and P-40 fighters, plus many others. He had logged over 2,250 flight hours, and if he had had 10 years of service, he would have been rated as a senior pilot. Before he was assigned to the CBI, he had ferried planes across the Atlantic at least 5 times, which was no easy task in the 1940s. In March of 1943, John's younger brother George had been killed in an accident in North Africa, and Blackie looked for a way to get into combat. In June 1943, he was assigned to Jorhat, India, flying C-87 cargo planes to China and back. While flying the hump route, he began a search and rescue group to help down pilots and rescue crews. In August of 1943, he and his crew helped rescue CBS newsman Eric Severide and 18 others from a downed plane. He began his rescue efforts with an unarmed C-47, but when the unit became official on October 25, 1943, they had 2 C-47s and General Stilwell's PT-17 trainer. There were 4 pilots and 8 flight crew members in the original group. Their base of operations was Chabua, Assam Province, India. Then Blackie found a couple of scrap B-25s, and his ground crew was able to salvage them and make them flyable again. These 2 planes were armed with 30 and 50 caliber machine guns. But Blackie and his crew made history by destroying a Japanese fighter from an unarmed transport. On November 6, 1943, while flying over Burma, they spotted the plane on the ground with engine trouble. They flew over, and by strafing it with a couple of Bren guns, which were British light machine guns, they set the plane on fire and killed the pilot. They fired from the window, similar to a modern gunship. Their C-47 had a small rising sun painted on the side to signify their victory. In 1942, Harold was working for the Curtiss-Wright Airplane Corporation in Columbus as an aeronautical engineer in the fuselage department. Both his mother and his father worked at the same plant. Since this was considered an essential wartime job, Harold could have been deferred from the draft. Yet he enlisted in the Army Air Corps on September 8, 1942, at Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana. His training and assignment stations included posts in New York, Kentucky, and Florida. While he was stationed in Florida, he was the crew chief on a C-46, which set a flight record for flying 15,000 miles from the U.S. to India in 4.5 days, all the while carrying 90 tons of cargo. This was in August of 1943, and when Harold was assigned to the CBI theater. At first, while in the theater, Harold worked on ground crews for transports flying supplies into China. But when Blackie set up the search and rescue team in October 1943, he had Harold transferred to the unit. Some other Marysville and Union County men also served in China like Blackie and Harold. They were Tom Foley, who was one of Blackie's co-pilots, Walter Hurd, Elwood Liggett, and Richard Reed from Milford Center. On the day of Blackie and Harold's last mission, Tom Foley, the usual co-pilot, was sick, and Walter Hurd was supposed to fly on the crew, but his commander needed him instead. So these 2 Marysville natives missed that last flight. The last mission came on December 10, 1943, on Blackie's second wedding anniversary. A C-47 transport was under attack in Burma, and when Blackie heard the distress call, he said, "Let's go get them." He was flying one of the B-25s armed with machine guns. As they came on the site of the downed transport, they were attacked by Japanese fighters. Blackie flew straight at them with the guns blazing. During the fight, another flight of planes was seen approaching and were thought to be US P-40 fighters because of the formation they were using. However, they turned out to be more Japanese Zeros, and they soon wounded the B-25, setting the right engine on fire. Blackie feathered the prop, which dropped their airspeed from about 300 miles an hour to about 160. This allowed the Japanese to catch up and continue to fire on the plane. The left engine was shot out, and Blackie gave the order to bail out. Since the plane had lost altitude during the fight, it was very close to the mountains. Only co-pilot James Spain was able to clear the plane before it slammed into the ground, killing Blackie, Harold, radioman Walter Oswalt, main gunner Harry Tucker, and a passenger, Major Ralph Dusnap. Walter Hurd was on the radio back at the base and heard their last message, being attacked by Japanese Zeros. The crew was originally listed as missing in action until Spain reached the Allied lines the day after Christmas in 1943. The wreckage of their plane was discovered in 2011, and efforts may be made to recover their bodies. At this time, it is my privilege to introduce Janet Porter and her family, and Sharon Kuntz and her family. Janet is the cousin of John Blackie Porter, and Sharon is the niece of Harold Niebler. Janet will begin by telling us more about Blackie. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Janet Porter as she shares her family's history of John Lawrence Blackie Porter III, bringing us his Voice from the Stone.
Good afternoon. My name is Janet Porter, and I am Captain John Lawrence Blackie Porter's first cousin once removed. I would like to start by thanking all veterans for your service and sacrifice so that we are free to be standing here today. I would also like to thank the Voice from the Stone Committee for choosing Blackie and Sergeant Harold Niebler to be honored today. I am humbled to be able to be here and share with you about John Lawrence. It's taken me on quite a journey. As I was a young girl, there were two significant events in our family that I remember hearing about the most. The first I will share for the most part is a result of the second. I am the third child in my family. My older siblings are John Lawrence, named for Blackie, and the late James William Billy. And I have a younger sister, Jennifer Diane. When I was born, my dad had to double check that I was really a girl because there had not been a girl born in the Porter family for 75 years. As I was told the story, the reason was that only boys had been born, and either they didn't have children or they died in the war. That is why I'm here talking to you today. The second story is about John Lawrence, whose plane was shot down in the war, and he was MIA. That was about all I knew. Now I know more. John Lawrence II and Rita Hallie Porter had two sons. The firstborn was John Lawrence Porter III, born in 1916. George Wellesley Porter was born in 1920. Both boys were born here in Marysville, graduated from Marysville High School, and attended the First Congregational Church. Their father was a salesman, and so they moved around a lot for his jobs. From a young age, John Lawrence was an adventurous soul. It is told that at the age of 8, the family was staying on an island near Palm Beach, Florida, taking care of property that was owned by the Porter family. John Lawrence's grandmother was very sick and near death, so he, his father, and brother returned to Marysville. His mother, Rita, stayed in Florida to care for the property. As the boys were in Ohio planning a funeral, they heard there was a hurricane headed toward the Palm Beach area. In the confusion of the funeral preparations, John Lawrence managed to slip away. He was nowhere to be found. The next morning, they still hadn't found him, so an all-points bulletin was sent out for an 8-year-old boy. He was found a day or two later in Florida, making sure his mother was okay. That adventure was only the beginning for John Lawrence. At one point during high school, he got frustrated and headed to Akron to see a family friend, also from Marysville, Cyril Jewell. He told Cyril he was not going back to Marysville, but Cyril convinced him that he needed to go back and finish high school and the importance of college. His talk worked, and John Lawrence left the next morning to come back to Marysville. He did finish high school, played football, and worked as a lifeguard at the city pool. I've heard the pool is why he got his nickname, Blackie, because he would get so tan. After graduating from high school, he attended Ohio State for 2 years. He then decided it was time to travel the world. With little more than the clothes on his back and $13 in his pocket, he headed out west. Along the way, he jumped on a train with some hobos. Apparently, he got into a scuffle with one, and the hobo slit his chest. When he came to, someone had taken him to a doctor who was caring for him in his home. He continued out west and got a job helping to build Boulder Dam. He ended up making his way to Hollywood. Once there, he got a job as an extra in a movie. He also met and became friends with Johnny Weissmuller, or Tarzan as he was better known. I haven't been able to find out what movie he was in, but I'm thinking it had to be something with stunts. Blackie decided that wasn't the life for him and returned to Marysville, which made his family very happy. At some point now, he learned to fly, as almost every article you read refers to him as a former stunt pilot. He began ferrying items from coast to coast. John Lawrence joined the Army Air Corps on November 20th, 1940 at Fort Thomas in Newport, Kentucky as an aviation cadet. On December 10th, 1941, he married his college sweetheart, Ellen Jane Smith of Dayton. Ellen was a model for McCall's, and she also modeled for the well-known military poster, "So Proudly We Serve." In February 1942, the need to develop a supply route to China led him to flying the Hump, one of the most dangerous missions of World War II. March of 1943 would be a turning point for John Lawrence. His brother George was also in the Army. As his unit was preparing for a mission, George's sidearm accidentally went off and hit him. He died of his injury. John Lawrence wasn't able to come home for the funeral. However, he came home the following month on his way to his deployment to the China-Burma-India theater. It was on that visit that he set his watch to that of Doris Hurd and told her to be at the corner of 4th and Main at a certain time. When the specified time came, he buzzed right down over Main Street. People talked about that for years to come. John Lawrence never really got over his brother's death. Casualties were mounting as aircraft were lost in the jungles of Burma. There was no organized search and rescue unit, so Blackie and his men began looking for survivors. When they were spotted, they would drop walkie-talkies, supplies, and survival kits. In August 1943, 21 men, including a CBS war correspondent, Eric Severide, were forced to bail out over Burma. Blackie's gang dropped supplies and helped monitor the survivors until they met up with a ground rescue mission. Publicity of the rescue validated the need for search and rescue unit to be based in Assam. The Air Transport Commission appointed John Lawrence Air Rescue Officer. He recruited airmen to join his group, which included several men from Marysville, Harold Niebler, Walter Hurd, and Tom Foley. The patchwork group would forever be called Blackie's Gang. On December 10th, 1943, 2 years to the date of his wedding anniversary, Blackie's gang headed out on a routine mission when they heard one of their C-47s had been shot down. All members of the C-47 were able to bail out and survived. With a "let's go get 'em," he thrusted the throttle forward and flew the B-25 like a fighter plane. It ended up that Zeros had attacked them and shot out both engines. Blackie called for a bailout, but only the Lieutenant James Spain had his parachute and could get out the top of the hatch of the plane. Lieutenant Spain got stuck on the way out, and so Blackie stood up and pushed him out. He pulled the ripcord and spun around a couple times. When he looked down, The plane had crashed into the side of the mountain and burst into flames. No one survived the plane crash. It would take Lieutenant Spain 15 days to find his way back to the command post. It was once he told his story that they realized that Blackie and the rest of the gang with him that day were not coming back. I thought that was the end of my journey, but it's not. My roommate Amy has been doing genealogy work on her family for a couple years now and got me interested in working on mine. She got intrigued with the story of Blackie's gang and would look for news articles and stories about his life. One day, a little over a year ago, she said that she found something and I should sit down. She came across a website called MIArecoveries.org. A man named Clayton Cools had spent a large part of his life and much of his own money searching for lost airmen in the China-Burma-India theater. It was posted on his site that he had recently found Blackie's gang's plane. He had taken pictures verified by serial numbers on the plane and actually found one of the dog tags of Sergeant Harry Tucker. He brought back just a few items that he found at the scene. There's hope that Blackie's gang will get the homecoming that is so well deserved. I recently found out, however, that the area where the plane is located is in the state Arunachal Pradesh, and if I crucified that, I'm sorry, in far northeastern India. It turns out that the land it is on is under Chinese control. They do not want the American government going in there without prior consent. Therefore, the Indian government has asked JPAC not to return to appease the Chinese. Clayton has submitted a contract to JPAC to go and recover 7 crash sites, with Blackie's gang being at the top of his list. We can only hope and pray that one day soon we will be able to stand here and welcome our missing soldiers back home again. After all, Blackie and his gang took on the challenge of search and rescue before there was a unit. Now we need to rescue them.
Thank you very much, Janet. Those were very wonderful words about Blackie and the gang. And now, I would like to have you all welcome Sharon Kuntz, who's going to share the voice from the stone for her uncle, Harold Niebler.
Can you hear me all right? When you get the short people up here, you have to raise everything up. My name is Sharon Niebler. Can't hear me? How's this better? You got a stool? Okay. Huh? Bend it down more? Can you hear me now? All right, we got it made. Okay. My maiden name was Niebler. My father was Harold Niebler's oldest brother. I grew up hearing all about Harold. He was 26 years old when their flight went down. We went to live with my grandparents 3.5 years. Uncle Harold was MIA. For those younger ones here, that means missing in action in World War II. And having grown up in my grandparents' home, we experienced Uncle Harold's life story firsthand. We lived through post-World War II years, sharing the sadness of the loss of our dear uncle. So much has contributed to my memories of Uncle Harold. In addition to personally experiencing the loss, my grandmother, his mother, has left us so much. She meticulously recorded family history, world events, in 3 journals that she kept from 1922 to 1974. In addition to the journals, she kept photos. Everything was labeled, who it was, where it was, and when it was taken. Thanks to her, we were able to preserve so much of Uncle Harold's life story. She would be so pleased that you are honoring him here today. In her journals, she has recorded his life through news articles, special cards and postcards, his baptism certificate from Trinity, his confirmation program from Trinity, report cards from Marysville High School, and I've got one of them that all C minuses except 2 B minuses. As a former teacher, I got a chuckle out of that one. And also in her journal, she has saved letters that were written back and forth with the War Department, trying to find out what happened to him and when they changed his status from missing in action, MIA, to killed in action, KIA. We have all of that she has saved for us. And we also have some postcards and letters that my grandmother saved from his comrades in arms, one of them being Jim Spain, who was the sole survivor on that flight. So thanks to Grandma, we had all of that stuff. Harold was the third of 6 children. He and his younger brother, Gene, who was 19 months younger, spent a lot of time together, and some of our favorite humorous stories in the family are about Harold and Gene. In fact, when I was growing up, I heard Harold and Gene so much, I thought it was one name for a while. They played football together in high school. They liked to hang out at what they called the hut. Apparently, this is a funny entry in Grandma's journal. Out on the southern farm, there was an old building, and all the neighborhood boys took it over and called it their hut. Well, Grandma made a journal entry in January of 1931, and I thought it was cute. She said, they're going to have to get them to close it up for the winter for their neglecting their lessons. Frequent journal entries referred to Harold and Gene. Harold and Gene went to town this evening. Harold and Gene picked berries. Harold and Gene are at camp. And my very favorite was an entry in January 1931. Gene was very dependent upon Uncle Harold. In it, she said, all the children are in bed now, but Eugene. He is waiting for me to go up with him, for he is afraid, as Harold is sleeping on the sleeping porch and Eugene has to sleep alone. He isn't afraid of anything in the daytime, but sure is a coward after dark. And she went further with repeatedly saying that Harold liked to sleep on the sleeping porch and Gene didn't like it. He needed to have Harold there with him, and he didn't like it when Uncle Harold wasn't there. Also, Harold loved to go fishing with his brothers and friends. According to his mother's journal entries and different news clippings, sounds like Harold was a very young man with many friends and a passion for life. Many milestones for Harold from cradle to grave took place at Trinity Lutheran Church. He was baptized there, he was confirmed there, and he went to church school there for grades 1 through 8. And he was honored there in memoriam after their fatal mission. Other Marysville ties is he graduated from Marysville High School in 1936. His best friends were John Spain, who later became mayor of Marysville, Frank Linsenmeyer, and John Porter. He worked a variety of jobs in the area, cleaning at a brass factory after shift to get it ready for the next day. During the summer, he worked on a farm and mowed lawns, and my favorite job for him was he was a chauffeur for O.M. Scott. So he kind of got around a little bit. He and Johnny Porter were comrades in high school, and I love to quote, they referred to them as the ex-gritters who continued as teammates in the grim contest of war. I love the way that was put. Once he was missing in action, things changed in our whole family. And as a small child then, I remember so much the feelings about Uncle Harold. Those feelings planted a seed of caring for him within my heart that is still there today, even though I was not quite 3 years old when he was killed. It's like I knew him. I will always feel my grandmother's grief and sadness, which she lived with every day for the rest of her life. She was relentless in her search for him because they never knew for sure, did he make it or not. For the remainder of her life, I watched her bear the cross of uncertainty and grief for her loved one. In fact, Grandma's mission became helping veterans. She was a member of the Gold Star Mothers and became president of the organization. She visited veterans hospitals. As a child, she took us to Chillicothe to the Veterans Hospital. There was one out on West Broad Street, and they would take cookies and candy and cigarettes, and we'd go with them, and they'd hand us cookies and say, go give this to the veterans. They'd sit us on their laps and tell us stories. But Grandma spent a great deal of her life working with veterans. I always had a feeling it kept her close to Uncle Harold somehow. His oldest sister, Marguerite, and her daughter and grandson are here today, also persevered. She married a military careerman. He became a colonel in the U.S. Army. And everywhere they traveled around the world, Aunt Margie would go to the veterans hospitals looking to see if they could find Uncle Harold by chance. That was especially true when they were stationed in Japan just after World War II. Grandma never gave up hope that he would come back someday. Her thinking was, maybe he's in a prison camp. Maybe he was wandering somewhere with amnesia and didn't know who he was or how to find his family. Some of my favorite memorabilia, I call them treasures of our family, taken from her journals. Uncle Harold's younger brother, my Uncle George, was in the U.S. Navy in the South Pacific in World War II. And he wrote a letter to Grandma about a month after Uncle Harold was missing. And I could tell by the letter he didn't know yet that the War Department had listed him as MIA. But he wrote to her and he said, as I told you when he was first lost, it could be 3 or 4 months at least before you hear from him. And then 5 months later, he wrote the following. They now had him missing in action. He said, as you said, he had his whole life ahead of him. He died for more than he could have ever lived for if he lived to be 1,000 years. And he went further to say, for a 19-year-old young man writing this, I thought the words were great. He went further to say, and that's how I would want you to feel if I were to get killed. And he said, which I won't. He said, but I want you to be glad, not sad, but glad that for a few lives today, it will be a better world for Sharon and Beverly and Johnny and Ronnie and Bobby. And he started naming all of my cousins. I love those quotes. And Grandma had all those letters. She has saved them all. One thing that I love, this is one of my favorites, she would cut out clippings, and this was published in Christmas of 1942, the year before they were killed. And it's called A Christmas Prayer, and she had this in her journal. 'Tis a lonely day because my sons are far away. They answered to their country's call that freedom's flag should never fall. My silent prayer shall ever be that God shall keep them safe and free and bring them back home to loved ones dear before Christmas comes another year. That was December 1942. They were killed December 10th, 1943. He never made it home for a Christmas another year. But I loved that she had cut that out. Another thing I loved, she had published in the Marysville Tribune on the second year anniversary of when their plane was shot down. It's called In Memoriam. We have anxiously awaited and longed for that step, and hoping through fate God would send him back yet. But God in his wisdom his own hath reclaimed, and taken him from this earthly strain. We now are resigned, for God knoweth best, and we are waiting to meet him at our eternal rest. But she clipped all kind of articles and things like that. I love going through that stuff. I own that stuff now. I spend a lot of time sharing it. Another thing is I have been doing about a 30-year family genealogy, and as I've done family trees, I was doing them for all of Uncle Harold's siblings, for their ancestors and descendants. And it just hit me so abruptly that his branch on the family tree ended December 10th, 1943. Just when I was doing it, it was just kind of the reality. He has no direct descendants to carry his memory forward. whereas his siblings have over 100 descendants to date. So it is with loving memory and deep appreciation that we have dedicated a section of this family album I've been working on for 30 years to him. His legacy is written so it will live forever in the hearts of family descendants, whose freedom he protected over the desolate miles of airstrip across the Himalayas and the jungles of Burma. And one of my other very favorite things, I've liked this since I was a little girl, in Grandma's book. Harold's family dedicated a sound system and chimes to Trinity Lutheran Church in memory of my uncle. And thoughts regarding him and others who gave their lives are so well stated in the Trinity Church Bulletin on May 23, 1948, when Trinity dedicated the sound system and chimes. It starts out saying, "Today we consecrate the public address system presented by the Ed Niebler family in memory of their son Harold, who sacrificed his life in World War II." And then the following was written. They entitled it, this was all in the bulletin, "A Musical Tower, the Dedication." And this is beautiful. "As a memorial to those who have given their lives for the preservation of our freedom, and to those who served us so valiantly in the armed forces, we lovingly dedicate our tower as a musical tower. What could be better than to remember in ringing, faith-filled music those who have put on so young the shining garments of immortality?" I love that line. "The sound system will infiltrate our community with serenity of chimes, organ, choir, and worship. Music shall sing the valor of loved ones gone, through the lanes and the fields they knew, to the listening hearts of those who loved them. We will memorialize them day after day, a tribute ever new, with an inspiration never old. Today we honor them with a tower to sing the glory of God and keep alive their memory, those heroes who served us and are serving us still. Yes, members of Trinity, join us in dedicating a musical tower to those loved ones lost yet never forgotten, to keep their songs alive and in our hearts forever." Is that beautiful? So with my closing thoughts, as a child, we used to come to Marysville. We lived in Columbus, and we'd come to Marysville to visit family. I loved hearing those chimes. We'd go outdoors and play, and I remember hearing the chimes while we were riding bikes, and I loved them. I had no idea they were ringing in honor of my uncle. In my heart, I know my grandparents and Uncle Harold's siblings are smiling down upon us today with great appreciation for the honor you're bestowing upon their son and their brother Harold, and his comrade and his friend, Captain John L. Porter. Thank you for honoring them today.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you both for helping us remember these two heroes. Now, on behalf of the Veterans Remembrance Committee, we would like to formally dedicate 17 new pavers to the honor, glory, and perpetual memory of those who have served and are serving from Union County, Ohio. The names and locations of the pavers for those being honored are listed on the back of today's program. The new pavers will be marked with blue tape. We thank all of you who gave new pavers throughout the last year, and the fact that so many family members have served and their names appear together in this plaza is a tribute to the love of country and tradition of service in Union County. Now we'd like to ask the Sing-Sations to perform a patriotic melody, and you are invited to sing along on verse 2 of each song using the words printed on your program.
Mountains, man.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to point out that that last song was one of the songs that Harold Niebler had marked in his hymn book, and that was why we chose it. At this point in the ceremony, we would like to dedicate a floral tribute to our veterans. The wreath will be placed by Major Alan Harper, U.S. Marine Corps retired, a nephew of Harold Niebler, and Anna Porter, daughter of Janet Porter and cousin of Blackie Porter. Thank you very much, Anna and Ellen. And now, I would like to ask you all to please rise and remain standing for the benediction offered by Reverend John M. Grote, Pastor Emeritus of Marysville First Presbyterian Church, followed by the retiring of the colors.
Let us pray. Merciful and gracious God, for every beginning there is an ending, and we have come to an end, to a moment of a gentle and tender hour. We are grateful that we have participated in this great memorial service. Heavenly Father, we remember, and we know that as individuals, as a community, as a civilization, we are what we remember and keep, not what we lose. So bless us. Bless all those we love. Bless the military who are on station today, and let them know that they have our prayers. And so, remembering that this is the land of the free because of the brave, we now say amen.
Color guard, retire the colors. I'd like to thank you all for coming today, and if you wish to see the new papers, again, they're marked with blue tape, and the names are on the back of your program. And I would like to... She wanted us to